Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all.
And as we did last week, how about if we let everybody come in with their mics on and say hello? And then once we have a chance to greet everybody in gallery view, we will switch to program.
Hello from Newark, Delaware.
Hello from Mount Holly, New Jersey.
It sounds more like a
from
Brooklyn
Norristown,
accent.
Pennsylvania.
Hello. Here's hoping that everyone's power stays on and internet stays connected.
But we'll know if yours does.
That's true. Yeah. I can hear it's clearly turned to sleet now because I can hear it against my window.
Yeah, it is.
So, well, welcome everyone again. I think David's going to do the official welcome. So we probably get started.
Sure. Welcome everybody. Glad that you're here for our third and final evening of Finding Home, an Advent study on welcoming refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers. We're glad you've taken some time to be with us. This has been a joint project of a number of pastors and also our global consultant and international ministries, Ray Skellinger, and his work around welcoming and ministering with refugees, so and immigrants, migrants. So we're glad that you're here. Just a few reminders. Once we start, if you could please make sure you're muted and stay muted, that'd be great. Second, if you have any questions during the session, feel free to type those in the chat box, and we'll have a time of questions and answers as we've had in the past 2 Wednesday evenings. I think that covers everything. So this evening, we're going to start off again with a biblical reflection on this topic. And so I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Sarah. And Pastor Sarah, if I missed any housekeeping items, please mention them. But I think
sure. I think that was it. The only other thing is we are recording this session, and we did record the previous 2. So some of you had gotten an email with the link to those recordings. It's on Royersford Baptist Church's YouTube page, so you can just search for Royersford Baptist Church on YouTube. We'll also be sending out an email to everyone who has registered with the link to those recordings for this session and the previous 2, in case you missed that. The video is missing of the first recording. That was 100% my error. It was resolved by the second time, and hopefully we'll get video on this one. So, but the audio is all still there, so you can hear the conversations that we had for our first session. And I think that's it. Let us get started. I'm going to read to you from Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 23. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. Although this passage follows directly as part of the Christmas narrative, it's not often one that we read aloud on Christmas Eve. We don't want to think about the slaughter of the innocents, of children being killed by a government power, of families with newborn babies fleeing in the night, of families unable to ever return to their homes due to violence and continued threats, of a people who are displaced. But we can't read just half of the story. There are some folks who push back against the idea that Jesus was a refugee. They claim that the family went to Bethlehem for the census, and then because Egypt was part of the Roman Empire, they couldn't possibly be refugees. But I'm not sure how many other ways we can read this story. The Holy Family fled because baby boys were being killed. They never returned home because credible fear remained. How this story might have looked different if the Holy Family had been turned away at the border. What might have become of Jesus's ministry if he had been separated from Mary and Joseph in detention? What if the government said that fear of having your baby boy murdered sounded a little personal, so they can't help you? Go back home. We're lucky that Jesus's story didn't end that way. But as we have learned over the last several weeks, there are many in the United States, at the US border, and around the world whose stories are ending that way. Separation, detention, being turned away, threats, and violence. Jesus was pretty clear with his stance on how we should welcome strangers. The Hebrew Bible is too. Paul is also. We can't open a chapter and text from the Bible without encountering words that tell us to welcome the stranger. Our biblical mandate is clear. But with a problem so pervasive, it can be overwhelming to know where to begin. We are blessed tonight to be joined by some folks who work daily in this area and who can help us understand what we can do to answer God's call today. And just as we will welcome the baby Jesus into our homes next week, we can welcome all of those who are fleeing and seeking refuge in our communities.
Thank you, Sarah, for that incredibly moving, incredibly deep reflection. Wonderfully done. Thank you. In my work in the last several years, I've had the opportunity to travel outside the United States to places like Tijuana, where there are tens of thousands of would-be asylum seekers knocking on the door, wondering if they might have a chance to seek asylum in the United States. I've been to refugee camps in places like Jordan, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Malaysia, where people are applying as refugees. 25 plus million people are now considered refugees, and wondering if there's a country somewhere that might take them in. So my work is focused on those outside the United States, but I am so glad to know that within the United States, there is an incredible community of people who have done heroic efforts in order to make sure that when those we admit are allowed to come into the United States, even if those numbers are a lot smaller than we wish, that they have communities and people of faith who are reaching out to provide welcome. Our partners, American Baptists within the United States who do this work, is Church World Service. And tonight we have a representative who is Stacy, I'm sorry, you're the faith based, I'm sorry, my brain no longer functions. I've hit 57 a couple weeks ago. That was it. If you would say your title, but also the vision that Church World Service has, and how it is that you let us know how it is that we can work with you, and our churches can be a part of the important ministry that Church World Service does.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks everybody for having me on the call today. My name is Stacy Clack. I work as a faith community organizer. I work with offices in within the CWS network in the Midwest and the West Coast, and I have a colleague, Christine, who works with our CWS offices on the East Coast. We work in two different ways. We work with denom leaders like Ray, who are doing this work at the denominational national level, and partner with them and helping them equip congregants like you all and church members like you all in with resources and connecting you to local offices to do the work. And then we also work at the ground up level with our local offices and helping them reach out within their communities, helping them navigate how to make those lasting community connections between churches and congregations and newly arrived refugees or immigrants or asylum seekers to those communities, and help build those relationships to provide friendship and integration into the community. So I'm going to be really honest with you. 7 years ago, I was sitting probably in the exact same seat a lot of you are right now. My degree growing up, when I graduated, I got a degree in ministry, but I was a youth pastor for 10 years in the Reformed Church of America, and then stepped away, had my own family, and then sort of started asking myself a question. And the question I started asking myself about 5-6 years ago was, what does it mean to be a person of welcome? Well, the first thing I did prior to that I should mention is about 8 years ago, I prayed for the good Lord to break my heart for the things that break his. Not a prayer I recommend. It will ruin your life in a good way, but it definitely has wrecked my life and caused me to be very brokenhearted, but in a way that God has brought me to a place to meet some incredible people and serve him in ways that I never dreamed of prior to this. And so that brings me to 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting in your shoes at my house asking, what does it mean if I want to be a person of welcome in my community? In our church at the time, we had just started attending, and they said, oh, we have a refugee ministry. And I was like, fantastic. What does it look like? And they said, oh, well, our refugee ministry, we help at this education center down the street. And I said, awesome, that sounds great. How many people from our church help there? Currently nobody. And I was like, oh, how is that a ministry of our church then? We're not even involved. And so I began asking our church those difficult questions of, if we want to be in like welcoming, and we want to welcome the immigrant, we want to welcome the refugee, we want to welcome asylum seekers, what does that look like for our church to take that step and be involved? And so our church made the decision to get to know the refugee. So we started welcoming with our local affiliate office in, well, it's a CWS affiliate office, but in Grand Rapids. I called them up and said, we want to welcome a refugee family to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I live. What do we do next? And so we started the process of getting trained at our office. And then we welcomed a family from Somalia who came over as refugees. Now that family arrived, and about a day before their arrival, working with the office, we still didn't know where the family was going to live. And me being the temperament that I have, I really like to get all worked up and worried. So I was all worked up and worried about, oh, what, we don't have this house. And one of my friends said to me, don't you think that the good Lord has gone before you? Like you have said, you're willing to offer this welcome. The good Lord will provide. And I was like, oh yeah, but I really want to be panicked right now because we don't have a house. We don't know what's going to happen. And she said, the good Lord's gone before you. So she said, put an ask out on Facebook and see if somebody has a house. So I put an ask out on Facebook, and all of my church group, we were all praying. Those of us that decided to welcome this family, there was about 10 of us together, and we're all praying about it. And 45 minutes after I post, I get a message. I have a house. Do you want to come look at it tonight? And I was like, okay. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm texting my friend, you were right. Okay, maybe the good Lord did go before me and he was ready and I shouldn't have doubted him. So I guess you're right. So we get in the car and I start driving there, and, you know, I'm sort of having this inner dialogue with God in my mind of like, all right, I shouldn't have doubted you, you know, yada, yada. And this family that was coming, the young boy who was coming with the family, who was 13 at the time, was wheelchair bound. And I had known that going in, but had not said anything about that when I posted. We were just looking for any house. And I get chills when I tell this story. And I told my pastor when this all happened that he should let me preach that Sunday and he should take a seat in the audience, because when we pulled into the driveway of this house, not only was it a house that would accommodate the entire family, but we walked around the backside and there was a handicap wheelchair accessible ramp to get inside. And so that started our church's journey on welcome. And we started, the family arrived, we brought them home. That ended up being a little bit more of a high needs case. The young boy needed a lot of care. We brought him into the hospital the day after he arrived, and he had some bed sores that had gotten really bad. And the doctors had actually told us that day when I brought him in, that if he wouldn't have arrived here within about a week, he probably would not have made it. And so this program that you guys are talking about, refugee resettlement and welcoming newcomers, it truly is a life-saving program for so many people. I can attest to that because this little boy is alive and well, and he's going to graduate high school next year. And he is a brilliant genius. And he is like so smart with like mechanical engineering stuff. And he's going to change the world someday. And he's here because he had the opportunity to come to the refugee program. And he's here because he had that opportunity to be welcomed. And our church has changed, and the vitality in our church has changed because we were able to extend that welcome to him. So I say all that to tell you that I was sitting in your same place saying, what can I do about this problem? How can I offer welcome? And it took getting involved, getting to know refugees, sitting down to have conversations. And sometimes our conversations were me and the mom, Halima, who spoke Somali and I spoke English, and we didn't understand anything that each other was saying, but we sat and had tea while our little kids played on the ground together. And we would laugh and laugh and laugh. And we spoke through just spending time and being with each other. And so one of the things that Church World Service does, which is a really unique opportunity for you guys as congregations, is to get involved in this work of welcome. How we do that is we have 20 offices across the country. And we also can connect you to office that is not a Church World Service office if there isn't a Church World Service office in your home community. But we connect churches and faith communities to this work of welcome by partnering you with a newly arrived family. And it's called community sponsorship. Some offices call it co-sponsorship. Some offices call it a welcome team. Some offices even call it first friends. It's called all different things in different offices, but essentially you are someone's first friend. You're the first face they see when they get off the plane. If during COVID, some of our families have met them for the first time over Zoom once they've arrived the day after they got here. Because of COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to go to the airport. But that first friendship welcome is like some of the stuff that you do before the family arrives could be like maybe setting up the apartment. Our church gathered donation items like beds, and we stocked their fridge full of groceries for 2 weeks, and we decorated the house and made it feel like a home. And that went down to like just even some artwork on the walls, right? Like just made it feel cozy and feel like a home. And then welcomed them to the airport, provided the first meal the night they arrived. A lot of them they've been traveling for 20 some hours and they're exhausted. And to have to come in, and I mean, sometimes I work for a half a day and I'm exhausted and don't even want to make my kids lunch. So like I couldn't imagine traveling for 20 plus hours and having to prepare a meal for my family. So our church provided that first meal when they arrived. And then we provided after that just social support and integration support to help them navigate the community and integrate into the neighborhoods that they lived in. Some of those things were like helping them find the local grocery store, taking them to get their groceries, or something simple like walking the neighborhood with them and showing them where the closest park is. I remember walking this family down to the local park and just pushing the kids on the swings and talking and getting to know them. Some of it was helping the kids do homework after school. They would get homework from their teachers, or helping them with reading and trying to learn the English language. Some of the other activities that folks participate in is some are like, oh, you know, I actually do hiring for a living. So they'll walk with some of our newly arrived refugees through hiring, like how to do an interview and what to wear to an interview and how to get set up for that job interview. So there's all different ways you can be involved. If you think about all the things that need to happen when someone first arrives here, there's so many different tasks and there's so many different opportunities for folks of all different giftedness, right? Like we all have different gifts and different strengths. And like, I assure you that there is an opportunity for each and every one of you to get involved in this work of welcome. We also, I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit. I have a bunch of resources that I'm gonna drop in chat for all of you. It's just a Google folder, but in that folder, it will have like an interest form. If you're like thinking, you know, that story that she told sounds like something that our church might want to do, or something that I might be interested in doing and I want to learn more about it. There's an interest form. If you fill that out, it's just your name, email address, city, state, and then what you're interested in. It's just a checkbox. You can check as many or as little boxes as you want, and we can get you connected to being able to explore this opportunity. Also in there, another big part of my job is training. And so in there, we have a 30-page manual on community sponsorship and all the intricacies of what that looks like in refugee resettlement. And we also have in there a upcoming Lunch and Learn series that we're doing through CWS, similar to these calls, like where it's a learning opportunity. They're happening every Monday from 12 to 12:45 Eastern time. It's over the lunch hour, and we're doing an actual 6-week training on how to become a community sponsor. So that will walk you through all of the different things about strengths-based volunteering, how to organize your church for welcome, how to get everything set up, what do you need, what lists. We have a whole bunch of resource lists on what to collect and what to gather. And then there's something in the chat. Oh, yes, I can answer that question too. One moment. And then also it will prepare you. And then at the end of it, we'll be able to connect you to the local office in your city. So that is in there. And then also we have a toolkit that CWS released for faith communities that want to accompany people seeking asylum. So we have refugee resettlement, and we help folks that come through refugee resettlement program. And we are just starting to work with asylum seekers. And we have offices that have opened in 4 cities across the United States now that provide case management for asylees. And we're looking for churches to partner with them and provide that integration support there as well. So that will be in there as well for you all. So just wanted to keep you, I'll drop that in the link when I'm all done talking, just so you know those resources are there. And then I'll have Ray send those out afterwards as well. But the question in the chat now, which cities in the US do most refugees arrive to and end up in? That's a good question. Refugees arrive in cities all across the United States. Texas is usually one of the biggest states for welcoming refugees. They get a lot of refugees and SIVs there. I was in Dallas last year before the pandemic, and it was so awesome to see the community down there and how welcoming they are of new Americans. I know there's like New York gets a lot. In Michigan they get a lot. The cities I work in specifically we have an office in Grand Rapids, in Chicago, in Indianapolis, in Lincoln, Nebraska, in Louisville, in Lexington, Kentucky, in Indianapolis, I'm gonna miss one and I'm gonna be in trouble for it, in Portland, Oregon, in Sacramento, in Amarillo, and in Dallas, Texas. So those are the cities that I have offices that I support. And then my colleague has 9 offices on the East Coast that she supports as well. And so there's opportunities all over, but like I said, if we don't have an office in those places, there's also remote opportunities that you guys can get involved in through doing remote, like a remote Zoom friendship. There's remote ELL tutoring that you can get involved in. There's donation kits that your church could put together for a newly arrived refugee family. So even if there isn't an office right in your town or your city, there are opportunities to get involved. So Ray, does that pretty much cover?
Well, I think that's a great start. Hopefully we'll have some more questions for you too.
Awesome.
I did want to, and I want to make sure Peter has enough opportunity to answer, I mean, to be able to chance to speak as well. I had one more question for you first, though, if I could
Yeah.
ask this. And the last call that I was a part of, the working group of faith leaders that CWS convenes, you were talking about the need to revamp our refugee resettlement program after having 2 years of drastic decline in the numbers of refugees that the United States accepted, and looking at another year in which that number is at 15,000, and perhaps we might not even be able to attain that. At the same time, knowing that there's a lot of asylum seekers that need those same exact services, you're talking about expanding. So you've got quite a few offices already, but you're talking about expanding and opening 10 new centers. Is that correct? Correct. And you're going to be looking for places where you could do that, different cities around the country that might be possibilities.
Yes, we are looking for different cities where there are faith communities that are ready and willing or wanting to welcome. So yes. How is that process
going to take place, and what is it that either being a part of those new efforts and then the new churches that the new cities where you want to begin a vibrant program? How is it that we as members of our churches can help support that vision of CWS to make sure that that the capacity is built and expanded so that we can begin to welcome truly the kind of numbers that this country should be?
Yeah, for sure. So as many of you know, President-elect Biden has announced, I think you've covered this possibly on a past call, but he's announced a new plan to welcome 125,000 refugees into the country. And so this past year, the current president has set the refugee admissions goal for the year to 15,000. So that is a significant increase. And over the last 4 years, the administration that has been in office, there's been a drastic decrease of the number of refugees that have been able to enter the country every single year. So it's sort of been a dismantling of the program over the last 4 years. Every year, less and less come. Offices are forced to make decisions about laying off staff or having not continuing programs because there hasn't been funding. And so going from 15,000 to 125,000, we are going to need a lot of community support in order to achieve that. There's only so much an office can do because they have so many clients. And so we're really going to have to rely heavily on faith communities across the country to be able to partner with our local offices and provide some of that community support. Now, as far as looking towards new places, there are a ton of factors that go into that. We're looking at cities that have good job placement ability for new incoming Americans. So some places we might be looking for places that have some jobs that are readily available. We have some communities where there's meat packing jobs that they're very willing and wanting to work with new Americans and refugees when they come in. So looking at what the job market is, looking at what the housing market is in these new cities where we open offices to ensure that the clients and the individuals that we're bringing here can have safe, equitable, and affordable housing into the communities that they're moving into. So that's another factor. Another factor that we're talking about is where CWS has 37 member communion denominations, your denomination being one of them that we partner with in this work. And so where do we have strong denomination presence of these churches that we work with, that we can have a good support base where churches and faith communities in those communities are welcoming and they want to extend welcome and they're ready to do so. So that's another thing we're looking at There's a huge long list of different factors that we're weighing in as we look at opening sites. But yes, we are planning and hoping and excited about the opportunity of expanding this program so that more communities can be directly involved in their community, and we can just see how I honestly, like, from my experience, believe that like working in refugee resettlement can truly like revitalize churches and bring life-giving energy into them, because you're able to be the hands and feet of Jesus right there to someone who has just arrived. So it's a really incredible experience.
Hi, I'm Ken George. I served on the Church World Service Board and the Executive Committee before I retired in 2009. I was the head of the Refugee Resettlement Domestic Disaster Program for American Baptist. And unfortunately, the Refugee Resettlement Program that was in place when I left has diminished to practically nothing. So I'm not sure how, and Sarah may be more up to date on what's going on with American Baptists regarding refugee resettlement, because I haven't been in touch with Church World Service for many years. But that has been because not only the diminished number of refugees, but I think the American Baptist leadership didn't hold the refugee resettlement as high esteem as of course I would have liked.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Thank you. I mean, also for all your years of dedicated service and keeping this before us as a denomination. This is one of the, one of the things that really has pained my heart as well, because I would love to find, some more active partners within our regions as well as within ABHMS. That I can work with, and that I could also make sure get much more involvement with organizations like Church World Service and other refugee resettlement agencies. We could do a lot more, and we need to do a lot more as a denomination. And in fact, this particular conversation and several more like this that I hope to be participating in regions around the country are exactly an effort to raise the issue and find out how we can do more, and to see if we can get our national leaders involved at a much higher level. So, but thanks, Ken, for that. And Stacy, thank you again very, very much for your presentation, for your passion and commitment, and the vital work that CWS does. We are so lucky to have a partner in CWS. And we, as Ken says, we need to learn how to be better partners to you. So thank you. Next this evening, and we will have time to come back to some questions, I hope, for Stacy. But also we want to make sure we give time for Peter to present. He is working with as co-director with New Sanctuary Movement of Philadelphia. This is an organization that is there doing advocacy and work on the ground with people that otherwise would not find anyone to advocate for justice on their behalf. He's working, and they are dealing with issues with undocumented people who are at risk of deportation, and also with the Dreamers, and doing advocacy on behalf of all of those who we have not been given the opportunity to live freely in this country which they call theirs. And Peter, I'd love it if you could share about New Sanctuary and how we, as American Baptists in the area, most of us on this call, I think, are in the region, can partner with you.
Thanks, Ray. And yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. It's a real blessing to be here with all of you. And as Ray said, so I work with New Sanctuary Movement of Philadelphia, and we work within Philadelphia and just starting to work more in the surrounding counties. But we do faith-rooted community organizing, and so we work with over 30 congregations in the area, both working with the Latinx community, the Indonesian community, the Afro-Caribbean community and their allies, and really kind of building relationships, bringing people together to work on different things that really kind of live out that call to love our neighbor and walk humbly with God and do justice. And so we do accompaniment. So we walk with folks in immigration court We do a lot of leadership development, training people how to organize change in their community, and then do campaigns that are picked by our immigrant members. And as I was thinking about tonight, just started thinking a lot about Advent and started thinking about Isaiah. I think one of my favorite parts of Advent is just how much Isaiah we get to read, and just how like hopeful and powerful those passages are. Just talking about like light breaking forth, and one of my favorites is Isaiah 58, where they talk about the type of fasting that God wants, and talks about to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and break every yoke. And then a few passages later talks about, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. And man, this Advent, I really need that light, just that hope, and that inspiration. But I think this Advent, I've been thinking just about those passages, I think often as just like the quick, like the light's going to appear and it's all going to happen. And I've sort of started thinking that this is like, all these things are hard work and take a long time. And I think right now we have some hard work to do. And I think especially as Christians and people of faith, we have a specific responsibility to kind of pick up a lot of weight and do some work. As we're ending 4 years of an administration that has been intent on, I think blocking as many immigrants of color from this country and kicking out as many as they can. I remember before, 4 years ago when President Trump was running for office, there was an interview with Richard Spencer, who's a leader in the white supremacist movement. And I don't know if it was with NPR, but he started talking. The reporter was asking him about immigration. And he said, it's not just illegal immigration that's a problem, it's legal immigration. We need to block all immigrants from coming, except for Western Europe. And, he went on, she asked him, well, what do you think about graffiti that says "Make America White Again"? And he was very, if you ever heard him, he's very smooth, right? Very good PR person. And he's like, well, I don't support graffiti. And she asked him about the swastika, and he said it's an ancient symbol. And, what about the KKK marching? And he refused to condemn that. What's been striking is that over the last 4 years, we've seen that that was not rhetoric. They're serious policies, and we've seen the policies they've rolled out in immigration. There's an article recently that laid out there's been over 400 changes to the immigration policy or system under this president, each little tweaks day by day to make it harder and harder to get in, or to block more and more people from coming. And while this administration is going to be leaving in a month, the rise of xenophobia, of white supremacy and extremist groups is still here. That they had their person in the office for 4 years, and they have built a lot of power and have moved into the mainstream. And I think we need to, as Christians, we need to remember that and think of how do we move into that? How do we lean into that and move toward healing? And also, I think talking about work, a Biden administration is not going to, on the first day, just change everything back or make everything all right. It's going to take a lot of pressure to make sure they undo or change all those rules. But also, we don't want to go back to the status quo. All our people, all the immigrant members we work with, that status quo is not working for them. Under the Obama and Biden administration, they deported 2.5 or 3 million people. They were pushing hard for local cities to work with ICE to break the sanctuary city policies. And so I think there's a danger of many of us going back, thinking that it's solved now and moving away from it, and when in fact we're gonna have to keep pushing. And I think the other part, though, we have learned, right, that I think we have hard work, but also in the last 4 years, I feel like we've learned that we can do the hard work, and we can lean into those hard times. And I think coming back to Isaiah, thinking about that light breaking forth, I think as I've been thinking about this, right, we've seen that light pop up, and we see it continuing breaking forth. And I get a lot of hope and inspiration from the work we do of seeing different congregations and people of faith coming together, and kind of slowly moving toward that. One of the things, with accompaniment pre-COVID, we go to court, and whether it be immigration court or traffic court or sometimes criminal court, and a lot of it is just being with people. It's not a protest, it's just witness. And so you're there in the courtroom and watching what's happening. But I think what is important is that you're getting the back of somebody. So you're surrounding the community. Two, it's really important that judges see that the community's there, the community's watching, there's some accountability. And, I don't think we walk in the courtroom and the judge is like, oh, you all here, okay, like you can stay. But we have seen it make a difference. And I do think, I remember one pastor said it's sort of like the visual representation of God's presence there. And I remember one of the first cases people we were working with years ago was a man from Pakistan, and he had been being held in York, PA, one of the detention centers there. And we were working with his wife and his 2 small children. But on his final court hearing, he was really nervous because the prosecutor had a reputation for being very aggressive. And during the final hearing, the prosecutor would go to cross-examine or object, but then would sort of close his mouth and withdraw or not say very much. And Fahim won the case, and afterwards he said it was like being like Daniel in the lion's den, where every time that prosecutor opened his mouth, God would shut it. And since COVID, we've kind of shifted because the courts are closed. We've still maintained those deep relationships with people, but a lot of times now we're shifting toward COVID support around COVID and the economy, since none of anyone who's like all the members we work with don't qualify for any stimulus checks or benefits. So doing a lot of like raising money to give them a stimulus check, passing out food, making sure people have access to healthcare. And then another piece, out of those families we've been working with, a group of about 15 started a community fund. And so it's a fund to get people to pay people's bonds. So immigration bond is usually set between like $7,000 and $15,000. And so they raise money to get people out of detention or get them get a down payment on a lawyer to start their legal support. And it's been, and so that continues to be run by this group of families. And then while we're doing that relational stuff, we're making sure we're looking at what laws can we change to make, to make people's lives better every day. And one of the key issues that keeps coming up is driver's licenses. So, in Pennsylvania, many states, if you don't have a social security number, you can't get a driver's license. But people need to drive. They need to get to work. They need to bring their kids to school. And if you live in a place that doesn't have that does have a connection between police and ICE, a traffic stop can lead to an arrest, which can lead to a deportation. And so this issue, even while things have been incredibly intense around higher deportations and higher arrests, driver's license keeps coming up for us. And this last fall, we've had a really exciting, I think, energy around this campaign where we have a new bill introduced in the state legislature, introduced by both Republican and Democrats. We did a 40-day statewide fast, as well as a kind of a more meeting with legislators and a parade at the end of the session. And I think what I love about working in sort of the cross section of faith and social justice is that we get to bring in those spiritual tools. So, we can, and after years of doing this, can say with confidence that, when we bring like tools like fasting or prayer to a campaign, it's not just something we do, that we know it's sort of working on a second level, and that it does work. And the other thing we do physical sanctuaries. So we do have 2 families in Philadelphia right now who are in physical sanctuary as a way to stop their own deportation. So they're living in a congregation while they fight their deportation, but also as a way to really say no to policies that are harming families, to call attention to this violence that's happening across the country by lifting that case up. But I think it's also for me stepping into, the radical love and inclusion we do want by living that out, and symbolically opening church doors is, modeling for our country to open our doors. And as far as that, I mean, I think not all our congregations do sanctuary. That's not there's many congregations that do a lot of accompaniment and advocacy in the campaigns without moving to physical sanctuary. But it has been, for some of those families, they've been in there 2 years and now 3 years, which means they've spent half or 3/4 of this administration behind the walls of a church. And I know when a few years ago when sanctuary was really big, I think in the media it's very sexy and very exciting. And the reality, it's hard. It's very hard. The mental toll and the emotional toll is really serious. And then I think looking forward, as we move forward to a Biden administration, the importance of really making sure the administration prioritizes a path to citizenship, immigration reform, and I think so. And I think I think the faith community does have an important role right now in doing some of this work. Some of the concrete ways that we have for congregations, and especially what we need right now, is around the driver's licenses, especially for congregations outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, who we can't win with just Philadelphia. And we are part of a broad coalition, but we do need folks who are willing to, in the new year, be part of a meeting to meet with your state rep or state senator to see where they are on this issue. And if they're supportive, great, have them get them sign on. And if they need a little convincing, to help us do a little convincing. And then participate in some actions in the spring. If anyone's really excited about it, they're more than welcome to participate. We have a committee within Youth Sanctuary Movement that sort of implements the strategy of licenses. The community fund also is something we need support with, just like hosting a fundraiser or helping raise some money to get some folks out of detention, which I think is a very concrete concrete, small, but impactful thing to be able to do. And I think also, I think as Stacey was saying, with accompaniment is critical. Right now, the courts are closed, but when they do reopen, that's always something that we need help with. So I really, I always really get a lot from being in spaces like this and just thinking how we can all come together to do this. So I appreciate the time, and I really appreciate the time with you.
Thank you so very much, Peter. I also know that good news is sometimes hard to come by, but that you will be announcing some good news in a couple of days. Could we find out how we might be able to listen in on what the right time to hear that?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. So it's been I forgot the good news. So we won a sanctuary case back in the spring, where a woman from Honduras had won her case. And there's a Jamaican family who's been in for over 2 years. And we are really close to winning, and have a big announcement about a development in their campaign on Monday. And if you're available at 10 a.m. on Monday, I'll send the link to Ray and he can share it out. But we'd love to have you. But yeah, so it's been good to get good news. It's very,
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. And I hope that this is just the beginning for many of the people that are here on this call to have further discussion, conversation, and support for the vital work that New Sanctuary Movement's doing. Another terms of some good news. Now, we had some pretty bad news we shared last week, Peter, that Benson, who is one of the asylum seekers that Adalia and I are hosting here in our home, had his BIA appeal dismissed. He's got some other avenues, but they're looking like increasingly to be longer and longer shots. But in the same time, Benson has continued to work work with a number of the African detainees that he had met while he was in detention. He's worked with almost 40 different African migrants, asylum seekers that he is working on their cases for them. I mean, just helping them in as much as he's allowed to as a fellow detainee and inmate. And I think 12 different people now have been freed from ICE detention based on the habeas work that Benson has done. And a couple of others, one just got their final ruling that was approved for asylum. And several others were actually taken off a plane before it could deport them to Cameroon. So he continues these efforts. One has been deported of the 36 people that he filed habeas cases claims for, but there's some other good news. And so Benson, although he was dejected about what's happening in his own case, is got a smile on his face every day when he talks to, as he continues to talk to other detainees from Pine Prairie and other facilities, as he hears good news coming from them. So there are some positive things to be focused on, and not the least of which is the new level of involvement that I hope we find together as we find out ways in which we can make a difference, we ourselves.
Great, thank you, Ray. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Peter, for sharing this evening. If you have any questions, have a couple here in the chat box. We'll put to Peter and Stacy. And if you have any additional questions, please take the moment to type those in. Peter, Dwayne asked, how did you first get involved with helping immigrants and refugees?
Yeah, so my parents are from Europe. My father's from Italy. He came here when he was a teenager, and then my mom is from England and came here when she was an adult. My father went back to Italy, and then they got married. So I grew up with some of those stories about like why my father left Italy when they were poor farmers after World War II and were starving. So it took like 2 weeks and sailed across the Atlantic. And then also, kind of with my mother, but like as an adult, seeing the rise in anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-immigrant legislation was really upsetting. But also seeing the access and opportunity my parents had as white immigrants was also, I think, really opened my eyes, and slowly started. I was part of a Catholic worker community, and there started talking with some folks about organizing congregations. And I also think, like, just as a white person, it feels like there's this responsibility there. I think this isn't a problem with immigration. It's a problem with white supremacy or racism. And I think so the onus is on me to really think about what we're up to as white folks. And I feel like the third thing is just, going to church on Sunday and reading scripture and then picking up the newspaper. Like, I feel like kind of really resonated what Stacy said about like, having my heart broken, and also just trying to figure out the when things aren't matching up. It feels like that gap is like a call.
Thank you. And you mentioned going to church and the biblical text. And here's another question about how can we comment? Not all Christians have the same view on immigration. We all have the same Bible. Can either of you comment on how we can talk about a faith community's voice when we're not all on the same page?
That's a great question. Stacy, do you have any thoughts on that one?
When you say a faith community's voice, are you speaking about like how we can join together as communities of faith across the country and speak to welcoming others? Because there's multiple scriptures in the Bible that command us to welcome others. Even when we look at like Father Abraham, when he welcomed the stranger, like Muslim faith believed that, Christian faith believed that, and Jewish faith all believed that he was told to entertain the stranger who came to him. And so I think from that perspective, like as people of faith and as Christians, like we have multiple examples set in front of us as being those who offer hospitality to the stranger and welcome. And we were all of us in this call are Christians. We were foreigners once as well, who were welcomed into God's fold of His family. And so it's like, how dare us not extend that to someone else who needs that same welcome? Like, that's just how I would put it. So I think whether we agree on how immigration programs are set up or on maybe some of the logistical things of it, we still can agree that we are, as believers, called to be welcoming and called to offer hospitality to the foreigner and stranger. It might look a little different maybe for you, but we're all called to do that. So that would be my 2 cents on it. I don't know, Peter, if you have additional comments you want to add.
No, that was great. I mean, I would just say, I feel like the only thing that comes up for me is just being sometimes moving from my head to my heart. So maybe talking about scripture, but moving from a heart place, or like, this is how I feel, or this is why my heart breaks, or like, but yeah, I'm still kind of figuring that one out too. And just experiment and fail a lot and try again. I do, my kids are starting to melt down and I do need to run. I apologize to leave early, but thank you all so much. It was really, I'm super grateful to be here.
Peter,
Thank you, Peter.
thank you very much, Peter, for your time and for joining with us this evening. We're very grateful to have had you, and hope all goes well with bedtime with your kids.
Maybe I should, if anyone has advice about that, I'd love to run a different call.
You're on your own on that one. Thanks, Peter.
I think it's a great question when this question about a faith community's voice. Sometimes that means that perhaps a particular faith community needs to take time to enter into conversations around the topic of immigration. And I think Stacy did a great job of, I think we can all agree what the Bible, we can look at what the biblical text says and the biblical imperative. But as one of my professors, Ron Sider, would say, sometimes we can have disagreements about what is the right policy then to live those values out. But I think we can all agree that some policies are in direct conflict with the values of welcome and hospitality.
If it would be okay, David, if I could say something about this too,
Sure.
Because, you know, it is so disheartening for me sometimes when I see the objections being raised to the kind of work that that I'm trying to do, and so many of the, you know, colleagues, friends, and others working with asylum seekers and refugees around the world have to confront. And it's not just within our own tradition. I think in you know, I have friends who work in a Muslim context who see the same exact divisions, as well as, you know, in Christian contexts from, you know, across the spectrum. And so, you know, we do have the same Bible, but often we have very different beliefs about it. And what's the most disconcerting to me is to see how sometimes, you know, and maybe we all do this, and this is something we just have to come to terms with and make sure that we are being honest with ourselves when we read the Bible, to make sure that we are taking out of it what God is really trying to tell us, and not what it is that we want to hear. But I remember a biblical conversation that was happening across the pages of a couple of different Christian magazines several years ago, talking about the word for foreigner, and so it's the word for alien, and that there was a, you know, an effort by some biblical scholars, some Hebrew scholars, to explain away the need to welcome the stranger, to welcome the alien, because as they were reading it, this was only referring to people who were documented, invited, people who were, as they would say, legal residents of Israel, and not and not, you know, somebody that was coming across the border without permission. Of course, you know, those things don't make any sense in that context at all. It wasn't as if there was a, you know, it's not as if there was any agency at any border to confer legality upon anybody. But sometimes we go through these incredible strains in order to be able to discount who it is that we have to welcome. And we have to confront that and try to help in loving conversation as best we can to have those discussions and try to win someone over to a broader understanding. I compared that particular, and it's somebody I was talking with who was bringing that up, is, to the person who questioned Jesus and said, well, who is my neighbor? And we don't want to be on the side of the person who's asking the question, who is my neighbor, in an effort to limit it as much as we possibly can, but rather want to, I think, accept Jesus's response, which I think opened that up to even the person that would be the hardest for us ever to identify with, to see that person as neighbor and brother, or sister, mother, father, son, and daughter, to develop that kind of relationship. But it's tough because we read those same pages and we come up sometimes with very, very different explanations and understandings. But ultimately, I guess the question is, do we want to be on the side of the person asking the question to try to limit it as much as we possibly can? I don't think so.
Ray, are we going to have access to those links that are on the chat, because we lose them once the chat goes off?
Yes, we will send them out to the group. Stacy, I have it here, so I should have access to it. So yeah, Ken, we will send those out to everyone who has registered for this meeting.
And there, Deb asked a question about what a sanctuary city means. I don't know if, Ray, if you can answer that question. I can give my understanding of it, but I would defer to you.
Well, and actually, Stacy might be the better person to talk with about this, because she's probably had to deal with it in different contexts. And the truth is that sanctuary city might mean something very different in one place than it does in another.
Okay.
And so, Stacy, across your experience, what have you seen what have you seen communities and cities interpret sanctuary city to mean?
As far as how churches interpret it, sanctuary cities are cities that are, sorry, my dog is vying for my attention now in my left. She's like, Mom, it's 8 o'clock. Sanctuary cities are places that have like made a statement to say that they are a safe place for those who are seeking safety and shelter, whether from asylum, and that they're a safe place. They're gonna, we have a few churches in our own community that are sanctuary churches where folks can stay and have a safe place to stay while they navigate the process of citizenship here and trying to apply for citizenship. I think of the term sanctuary itself, and I think of what it's meant in my own life. And we talk about like the childhood song that we used to sing in church growing up about, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, right? Like we used to sing that song all the time growing up, be a safe place for those around me, be a safe place for my neighbor, be a safe place for my community, be someone who is a place where someone can seek refuge, to come and sit with me and seek refuge and have conversations. So I see it could play out sort of both ways. And when we're talking about like what the church might see it as, is like, we also see it as a sanctuary, as like a building, right? Like we go to the sanctuary to worship. But we know that it's worship doesn't, like you go out and you leave and that's where you do your worship and out into the world and you go out and you serve. And so that's my understanding. I don't do a lot of work with sanctuary cities or sanctuary work from what I'm doing. Mostly my interaction is with churches, but we do have some churches that are involved in that sanctuary work, as in like being safe places.
Yeah, and I think the definition that most communities work with is an understanding that at some level the community itself is not going to cooperate with ICE in terms of its enforcement of what they call ICE holds. So the Secure Communities Act is something that passed during the Obama administration, the first Obama administration, and that was, Peter made a reference to this too, about the enforcement and the deportations that picked up under this. And so the U.S. was actually withholding funds, the U.S. government withholding funds from certain cities or states, where if if city police officers would not cooperate with ICE. What cooperation means that if you pick up somebody for, it could be, and one of the cases, one of the people I was working with is somebody that was deported because they had been out at night without lights, coming home from work. They were riding a bicycle without lights and picked up, brought in, and the local police department saw that there was an ICE hold on this person, that they believe they might not have legal documentation to be in the United States. And so they were then held by the local police force, picked up by ICE, put into detention for several months while the case proceeded, until finally, I think 6 months later, he was deported to Tijuana, a country he had never known. He was in the US since he was a baby. But so an ICE hold works in terms of, a local police force cooperating in a way that they will hold on to somebody until ICE can come and take possession, take that person into custody. Some states have said, well, for minor crimes, we're not going to do this. If somebody's caught jaywalking or riding a bicycle, on the sidewalk or without lights on, we're not going to hold on to them indefinitely for days until ICE can come and take them away. And so some cities have defined themselves as sanctuary cities in that sense, but it can mean different things in different places, and the level of cooperation can vary quite a bit from one place to another as well.
I don't see any other questions at this point in time. I do have a question for you who are participants. My question is if you have interest or would like to take further action around finding home for refugees, migrants, asylum seekers, finding home for them, but also finding our own home in a spiritual sense of creating room, of making room for them here in our communities, that if you felt that through this study, God has been speaking to you, I would want to ask you to please let your church pastor know, your local church pastor know, and then we'll convene we'll figure out a way to bring people together, to partner together in mission. And let Ray know too. My hope was that we might find a way to work together across our congregations to take some significant mission and ministry opportunities together around this area.
David,
Pastor Sarah,
if I may ask, I know that we have folks from Royersford Baptist on the call, from Grace Baptist. We have folks from Calvary Baptist in Newark, Delaware. What other churches do we have represented? Go ahead and unmute and shout it out or type in the chat.
Central Baptist Church.
Central Baptist Wayne, yes, thank you, Adalia. Well, Hatboro too, Doug up there in the corner. First Baptist
St.
Bentonville,
James.
Oregon. St. James, all right.
UCC in Limerick.
Wonderful.
Crossroads Community in Erie.
That's way up there.
Way up there.
Way up there.
It's cold in Erie right now too.
Yeah, get there.
First
But
Baptist
we're not getting
Norristown.
the snow that Eastern Pennsylvania's getting.
Oh, well, we'll send some to you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's great to have so many folks represented here. And like we said, we will be posting these links online and you will receive an email with them. And feel free to share with other people in your church, with people outside your church, whoever you think needs to hear this story. One other thing, Benson's story is we're working on capturing his story and finding a way to share that to our community. So stay tuned for that. Once that video is ready to go, we can share that with you all, and you can use that with your churches and whoever. We want that story to be spread far and wide. So keep your eyes and ears out for that.
If I may say quickly, in terms of refugee resettlement, the closest affiliate of Church World Service that's still in operation is in Lancaster. Now, it used to be they couldn't operate more than 50 miles from their location because they wanted, to have it closer to the refugee resettlement being in that area. So the Lutherans used to have one in Philadelphia. I'm not sure if that's still available or not.
I don't think that the Lutheran one is.
I can send a link to Ray to the ORR website where it will have all the places where there's offices for community sponsorship. Also, RCUSA also listed, well, RCUSA has like places where there's community sponsorship opportunities. So if your church is interested in partnering with a newly arrived refugee to provide that welcome, CWS, all of our sites have community sponsorship opportunities. Some are like almost like a full co-sponsorship. Some are smaller with like more pre-welcome activities, or they have mentorship activities. It just kind of varies between offices. On our CUSA site, they list a more extensive list across all 9 national agencies of where you can do community sponsorship. And then ORR will list all the websites, as you probably know, Ken, all the websites and all the locations of all the offices doing resettlement across the country. So I will get all 3 of those.
24 of them.
Yeah, I'll get all 3 of those links out to Ray, and he can get them over to Sarah, whoever's going to send out the email, so everybody has access to those resources as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No problem.
And once again, we just want to thank Stacy and Peter and all of the guests that we've had over the last 3 weeks, and especially to Ray, who's our American Baptist global consultant for immigrants and refugees. We are truly blessed by the work you do, Ray, and the connections that you make for us.
It looks like I think my kids it's past their bedtime, and I have to try to get them to. I don't know. Did you just be quiet and go? Anyway,
we know they're tough there.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, very much. Yeah, and if there's anything I can do, actually, I am your servant. If there's anything that you're interested in getting involved in and you want help on how to do it, I would be delighted to be able to work with you to make that happen. And also, please say hi to Benson, who just joined the call right on time.
Benson.
Hi, Benson.
Hello. How are you all?
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I joined a few minutes ago, but I was just first listening to how far you guys are. I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay, Benson.
No
We're
problem.
glad you're here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was going to wrap us up here, right?
No, I was going to say,
Getting
Sarah,
me
would you
past
take
some
it
of our
away?
bedtimes.
I was just, Sarah, would you take it away and wrap us up?
I'd be happy to. So before we take off, I just wanted to share a video with you. This is from, oh gosh, where is it from? The SALT Project. And it's just a quick 1-minute video that I think will sum up our time together well.
As Christians, we believe in a God who creates all things, people, religions, languages, beauty, and every color in the rainbow. As Christians, we believe in a God who becomes flesh, born in a stable, a refugee with nowhere to lay his head. As Christians, we believe in a God who fills us with the courage to welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, to love the foreigner because we were foreigners in the land of Egypt. This is who we are as Christians, people created to love, to welcome the stranger, and to walk hand in hand with all God's people through God's starry night and into the dawn.
Amen. Pastor Doug, would you pray us out?
I'd be privileged. It has been, I want to thank those that helped put this together and for the opportunities that we've had to learn, to meet, and to be challenged. So let us pray together. Our Heavenly Father, this evening we thank you so much for the privilege we've had to look at your word, to look at your people, and to look at your world. I thank you for the work of Sarah and Ray and David. Thank you for Stacy and Peter as they've shared. We pray for Benson tonight as he continues his journey. Show us how we can walk with him and with so many others who are in such desperate need. Father, may we be people who are seeking justice. May we be participants in tearing down the dams that have been built on the river of justice so that it can flow freely. May mercy run through us as a people and as individuals. And may you be seen in all that we say and do. Through Christ we pray. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Stacy.
Stacy.
Yeah, and everybody unmute yourselves and give a shout out to the group. It may,
Ray, you better get those kids to bed.
I pray that you all have a wonderful, joyous Christmas season filled with love, filled with new cause for celebration. God bless. God bless
Amen.
everyone.
Same
here.
Merry Christmas.